On a cold night at the end of October, as the wind howled outside my window, I sat alone in my newly rented apartment. The house was on the outskirts of the city, isolated from all the noise, and rented at an unusually low price. The day I moved in, the landlord gave me a strange smile and said, "Make sure to close all the windows and doors before going to bed." At the time, I didn't think much of it, but that advice became haunting when the night fell. The first night in this quiet house, I felt something strange. Not a sound, but a feeling like someone was watching me. I told myself I was just stressed from a long day of unpacking and tried to brush off the inexplicable fear. I went to the bathroom to wash my face, and when I looked up at the mirror, I was startled. A figure stood behind me, fleeting like a wisp of smoke. I spun around, but the hallway was empty. My heart raced, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination. I decided to go to bed early to forget the unsettling feeling. Just as I lay down, I remembered the landlord's warning and carefully checked the windows and doors. Everything was locked. I tried to close my eyes, but something kept gnawing at me, leaving me restless. A faint noise came from the living room, a whisper like the wind slipping through the door cracks, but clearer. I sat up and listened, my breathing becoming shallow. That whisper, ... It wasn't the wind, it was the sound of someone talking, but too faint to understand. I decided to check. The living room was just as I'd left it, no one there, but a cold draft swept through, making the hair on my neck stand on end. The window in the living room, which I was sure I had locked, was now slightly ajar. My heart dropped. I quickly closed the window and double-checked the entire house. The front door was still locked, no signs of forced entry. I returned to my bedroom and turned on the light. In the warm glow, the room felt less threatening. But then I heard another noise from the wardrobe, a soft click as if something inside had touched the door. I approached, heart pounding, and listened. My breath hitched as I extended my hand to open the wardrobe, but before I could grasp the handle, the door slowly creaked open by itself, accompanied by a long, eerie groan. I stood frozen, staring into the pitch black inside the wardrobe. Suddenly, a pale, thin hand reached out from the darkness, grabbing my arm in a flash. I screamed and yanked my hand free, stumbling backward and falling to the floor. The figure from the wardrobe leapt out, its form not human, twisted and distorted. It lunged at me, its hollow eyes and whispering mouth emitting strange sounds. I scrambled to my feet and ran for the door. Just as I reached it, a voice from behind called out, "Don't leave. You won't escape." It wasn't the voice of a human, it was a chilling, hissing sound that froze my blood. I bolted down the hallway towards the front door, but when I tried to unlock it, the lock wouldn't turn, as if it were stuck. I turned around to see the shadow standing in midair, its empty eyes fixed on me. The darkness in the room thickened, as though it were being consumed by the shadow. It let out a chilling laugh and slowly moved toward me. In my panic, I remembered the candle I had brought from home, which my grandmother had told me to use in unusual circumstances. With no other options, I dashed into my room, grabbed the candle, and lit it. As the flame flickered to life, the shadow recoiled, its hissing becoming more intense, but weaker with each passing second. In its final moments, Before it dissolved into the darkness, the shadow hissed, "You may escape tonight, but I will return." The room fell silent, as if nothing had happened. The locked door unlatched itself, almost as if mocking me. I rushed out of the house, never looking back. When I reached the gate, the wind suddenly died down, and silence enveloped the neighborhood. I decided to leave that house forever, but deep down I knew that this was not the only place that entity had ever haunted. It had existed for a long time, and surely one day it would find me again. I was working late at the office, which had become a routine for me. My name is James, and I work as an accountant at a small firm. The office was quiet at night, with only the sound of my fingers tapping on the keyboard and the hum of the air conditioner. It was a Thursday night, and I was trying to meet a deadline. When the clock struck 11:45 p.m., I felt the weight of the day. My eyes were heavy and my back ached from sitting too long. Suddenly, I noticed a faint flicker of light in the corner of my eye. I stopped and looked up, but there was nothing there. I brushed it off as my tired mind playing tricks on me and went back to work. However, the feeling that something was off lingered. The air seemed heavier, and the silence felt more oppressive. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just the late hour getting to me. About 15 minutes later, just as I was considering calling it a night, I heard a noise outside the office door. At first, it was faint, like someone moving around. My heart skipped a beat, and I froze in my chair, listening intently. The sound came again, louder this time, like footsteps. My first thought was that maybe someone had forgotten something and come back to get it. But who would return at this hour? I slowly got up from my chair, my movements cautious. I walked over to the office door and pressed my ear against it. The footsteps had stopped, and there was only silence. I hesitated, unsure whether to open the door or stay inside. Part of me wanted to pack up and leave, but curiosity got the better of me. Just as I reached for the door handle, there was a loud bang followed by a shout. "Put your hands up, don't move," a commanding voice yelled from outside. I recognized it immediately as the police. My heart raced, and 1,000 thoughts ran through my mind. Why were the police here? What had happened? I slowly opened the door, my hands trembling. 2 police officers stood in the hallway, their guns drawn and pointed at me. Seeing the guns made my blood run cold. I instinctively raised my hands, confusion and fear washing over me. "What's going on?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. "Are you alone?" One of the officers asked, his eyes scanning the office behind me. "Yes," I reply, my voice shaky. "I'm the only one here." The officers didn't lower their weapons. Instead, one of them stepped forward and motioned for me to move aside. "Stay where you are," he ordered. We received a report of a break-in. My heart pounded even harder. A break-in at the office. I glanced around, expecting to see the intruder standing right there, but there was nothing out of the ordinary, just the usual clutter of papers and office equipment. "I didn't hear anything," I said, my mind racing. Had someone broken in while I was working? "We saw a man enter the building," the other officer explained. "He was seen heading toward this office." The officer's words sent a chill through me. I had been so engrossed in my work that I hadn't even noticed. I stepped back, allowing the officers to enter the office. They moved quickly, their eyes scanning every corner of the room. One of them checked behind the desk, while the other looked in the small storage room at the back. I stood near the doorway, my hand still raised, feeling completely out of control. "Stay calm," one of the officers said as he continued his search. "We'll find him." I watched as they methodically searched the office, opening every cupboard and looking under every piece of furniture. The minutes felt like hours, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was in the middle of a bad dream. I kept thinking about how close the intruder must have been, how he could have been watching me while I worked. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, one of the officers called out, "Over here." His voice was urgent, and I could see the tension in his posture. He was crouched down, looking under one of the desks near the back of the office. I held my breath as the other officer rushed over to him. They both peered under the desk, and then I saw a shadowy figure hidden beneath. My stomach churned as I realized that the intruder had been in the office with me the entire time. "Come out slowly," one of the officers commanded, his voice firm. The figure under the desk didn't move at first, but then slowly a man crawled out. He was disheveled, his clothes dirty and torn, and his eyes wide with fear. As the officers pulled him to his feet and handcuffed him, he looked like he hadn't slept in days, his face pale and gaunt. I stood there frozen as the officers led the man out of the office. He didn't say a word, just stared blankly ahead as they took him away. The whole thing felt surreal, like something out of a movie, but it was real, terrifyingly real. After the police left with the intruder, I sat back down at my desk, my hands still shaking. The office felt different now, no longer the familiar place I had spent so many late nights in. It felt tainted, as if the shadows had come to life and swallowed the safety I once felt here. I couldn't finish my work that night. The thought of staying in that office for even one more minute was unbearable. I grabbed my things and left, the cold night air hitting me as I stepped outside. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my nerves, but the fear lingered. That night changed the way I saw the office. I couldn't bring myself to stay late anymore, not after what had happened. The thought of that man hiding just a few feet away from me, watching me while I worked, still haunts me. I can't help but wonder what might have happened if the police hadn't shown up. I've always loved my work as a graphic designer. I get to create new things every day. My office is small and quiet, perfect for focusing on my projects. I usually spend most of my day working on designs for clients, making sure every detail is perfect. I take pride in what I do, and even though it can be exhausting, I always feel satisfied when the day ends. But something changed after one night that would stay with me forever. It was a Friday evening, and I was ready for the weekend. I left the office around 7 p.m., later than usual, but that wasn't uncommon. The sky had turned a mix of orange and purple as I drove home. I was looking forward to relaxing, maybe watching a few movies, ordering takeout, and unwinding. When I got home, I parked in the driveway and headed inside. My house is a small, single-story place with just enough space for me. I've lived alone there for the past 3 years. It's in a quiet area, which I love because it's peaceful and I can always find calm after a long day at work. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The house was dark, just as I expected. I turned on the light in the hallway and kicked off my shoes, enjoying the feeling of finally being home. The familiar scent of the house greeted me, and I felt a sense of comfort. I made my way to the living room and tossed my bag onto the couch. As I walked to the kitchen to grab a drink, something caught my eye. There was a faint light coming from the kitchen. At first, I thought it might be the glow from the street lights outside, but it was too bright for that. I had made sure to turn off all the lights before leaving for work that morning, so this didn't make sense. I felt a slight unease, but brushed it off. Thinking maybe I had forgotten to turn off the light, it had been a long day at work. After all, as I approached the kitchen, the unease grew stronger. The light wasn't coming from the ceiling. It was coming from the direction of my refrigerator. I walked into the kitchen slowly, my footsteps soft on the floor. The light was coming from the open door of the freezer. My heart started to race. I was sure I had closed it. Who would leave a freezer door open? I lived alone and was the only one with a key to the house. The comforting quietness of my home suddenly felt eerie. I stepped closer and then saw a man standing in front of the freezer, his back to me. He was dressed in dark, dirty clothes, and his hands were inside the freezer as if he were looking for something. My breath caught in my throat, and I froze. This couldn't be real. How could someone be in my house? My mind raced with questions, but there was no time to think. Without making a sound, I slowly backed away from the kitchen. The man hadn't noticed me yet, but I didn't want to take any chances. My hands were shaking, and my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I moved quickly and quietly down the hallway toward my bedroom. Once inside, I locked the door behind me, my hands trembling as I turned the key. I stood there for a moment, my back against the door, trying to calm my racing heart. My mind was in a whirl. How did he get in? Why was he messing with my freezer? None of it made sense, but I couldn't stay frozen in fear. I had to do something. My phone was on the nightstand by my bed. I grabbed it with shaking hands and dialed 911. My voice quivered as I explained the situation to the operator. The minutes felt like hours as I waited for the police to arrive. I kept the lights off in my room, afraid that any sign of movement might alert the man that I was there. I didn't know if he was still in the kitchen or if he had heard me leave. Every creak of the house made me jump. The silence was deafening, and each second ticked by with tension. I tried to listen for any sound, but all I could hear was the rapid beating of my heart. After what felt like forever, I heard the faint sound of sirens in the distance. Relief washed over me, but it was mixed with fear. What if the man heard them too? What if he tried to escape or, worse, come after me? I couldn't stop my thoughts from spiraling. Finally, I heard the sound of the front door being forced open, followed by heavy footsteps. The police had arrived. I unlocked my bedroom door and slowly opened it, peeking out into the hallway. I could see the beam of a flashlight scanning the wall as the officers searched the house. I stepped into the hallway, relief flooding through me. "I'm here," I called out, my voice shaking. They quickly moved toward me, asking if I was okay and if I had seen the intruder. I explained everything from the light in the kitchen to the man at the freezer. The officers searched every corner of the house, but the man was gone. There was no sign of him, not even a trace. The police told me it wasn't uncommon for burglars to break into homes looking for easy targets, but something about the situation felt off. Why was he interested in my freezer? Why didn't he take anything else? I had no answers, only questions that haunted me long after that night. The next day, I installed security cameras and changed all the locks, but the fear stayed with me. Every time I came home from work, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone might be inside waiting. The once comforting silence of my home now felt heavy, filled with the memory of that night. I never saw the man again, but I always wondered who he was and what he wanted. The police never found him, and the case went cold. For me, the fear never went away. I still love my work, but coming home is not the same. The safety and peace I once felt in my house are gone, replaced by the lingering fear of the unknown.